Hello world, my name is Leo and today we are reviewing / discussing Bo Path of the Teal Lotus. This is a Metroidvania Souls-like platformer, kind of in the vein of games like Hollow Knight or Ori. It was developed by Squid Shock Studios and published by Humble Games. Rest in peace. Now, I actually helped back the Kickstarter for this game, and so I was able to play it at release, and I have to say, this was a really solid experience, especially coming from a studio who, as far as I can tell before this, has only really made mobile games. Like, I looked on their website, and the most popular other game they had made was a party charades, like one of those games where you hold the phone up to your forehead and other people try to act out the word that's on the phone, as far as I can tell. Like one of those kinds of games. So to go from that to this is incredibly impressive because this is an extremely well-made game and it shows the studio has a lot of potential. Now, there are definitely some kinks here that hold the game back from reaching its full potential in the same vein as those other games, Hollow Knight and Ori, particularly when it comes to the story and how the game is structured. But the good aspects about the game, like the aesthetic and the gameplay, really helped carry this game through, and I would recommend it. I did have a really good time with this game. And so I'd actually like to get the kind of stuff that I found lacking out of the way first, so that I can focus more on the good things later on. So let's go ahead and get the story, writing, and characters out of the way all in the same block. And it's not all bad here. The writing and the characters are actually good. The writing is believable. I never thought the writing ever felt stilted or generic. It's above average. It's believable. It felt nice. I enjoyed engaging with these characters. And the characters themselves felt very endearing. However, another word that I would describe these characters with is fleeting, because this game is actually pretty short and it feels really short, and I feel like that ends up hurting the game in the long run, just because I feel like the characters and the game as a whole could have benefited from being longer and being more fleshed out and having more to it. So the game I finished in about 15 hours, and that was with me going out of my way to find all of the secrets, regularly pausing to swap between recordings, and with multiple attempts on a couple of bosses and multiple attempts on a platforming combat trial side game kind of thing that I ended up giving up on because it was way too hard. So, in my opinion, this game is a little bit on the shorter side when it comes to Metroidvanias, and it feels short. And that can especially be felt in the story, where the writing is good and the characters are good. The story, in my opinion, has some pacing issues that kind of make it a really mixed bag. There are some individual moments that are really great. There's in particular, a kitsune wedding in this game that really stood out. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, but this game is based entirely around Japanese mythology and folklore. And that's something that the game does really well, particularly when it comes to aesthetics. That's when I was going to talk more about it. But for what it's worth, the way that the story handles Japanese folklore is really good and really interesting. You play as Bo, who is a Tentai Hana, a spirit born of a flower, in this case the Teal Lotus. And the plot essentially revolves around why you were born, why you were summoned to this earth, and trying to look into the various mysterious rumblings of a demon that might be roaming the earth and the inner machinations of stuff that might be happening behind the scenes. I won't spoil anything because like I said, there are moments in this game that are really awesome, I thought. But the way it's structured leaves a little bit to be desired, and there are some pacing issues with it. So the way this plot is structured is, again, kind of like a combination between Hollow Knight and Ori. Especially in the first half of the game, you are doing a lot of exploring locations. There aren't really any like main objectives for you to do. And you're just kind of figuring out where to go, kind of feeling things out. But later on in the game, and like kind of sprinkled throughout the game, there are side objectives, and again, later in the game, you get some main objectives. Now, because the game is structured this way, the plot does feel like it meanders a little bit in like, I would say like after the initial like first chapter, the plot does kind of meander a little bit. And I don't feel like there's really a proper build up for the climax that happens. Like, there is a little build-up, but some of it can be a bit confusing. Like, there was this one time where I got an ability, and I left this place, and then the screen after I left the place, an NPC came up to me and was like, hey, you should go back to that place you just were. In the time that you left, something major happened. And I was like, what do you mean? In the time that I left, something major happened. It's only been seconds. What could have possibly happened? But sure enough, I did end up going back to that place, and stuff did happen. And it just felt really sudden. And that's what I mean, where it's like, there's not a proper build-up to things. Then like the climax comes really suddenly. And then it kind of falls, like a falling action, with still some tension, and then there's a second climax, kind of, at the very end. So yeah, you have kind of a meandering plot with very little build-up, climax, slightly falling, but still, like, tension and slight building, and then another climax, and then the ending is also really confusing. So you do get, like, a resolution, quote-unquote, like you have a sequence where things are being resolved, but then the ending cutscene, like literally the last cutscene in the game, ends super abruptly, to the point where it almost felt like it cut itself off. There was something in that cutscene that did seem to reference a part of the game that is currently inaccessible. So I can't help but wonder if there's some kind of update coming that's supposed to address this, but as it is in its current state, in its release state at launch when I played it, the ending feels super abrupt and almost incomplete. And when credits started rolling, I just felt like super confused. So yeah, that's what I kind of mean when I say the story is a mixed bag. The characters, writing, and some individual moments are all really great and really do a lot to help hold up this story. And the Japanese folklore is constantly interesting to like see where this story goes with it. But the story and plot, especially the structure as a whole, really didn't come together for me. However, those are my only complaints about the game. Now I want to move on to the good stuff, because like I said, at the end of the day, I would recommend this game, and the aesthetics and the gameplay really do a lot to make me feel that way. So first I want to talk about the aesthetics. It is arguably the best thing in the game. Again, this game is based around Japanese folklore and myth, and you definitely feel that in the game's style. The hand-drawn art almost has like a paper-like design to it, and it looks absolutely fantastic. The color palette is always very colorful and vibrant, from the pinks of the sakura trees in the like main town hub area, and also the like samurai garb that the guards are wearing, to the like deep reds and blues of the forest in the beginning part of the game, to the greens of the other forest and the gray and blue of the mountains. Like, everything is constantly colorful and just amazing to look at. This game is beautiful, and the character designs are so interesting and also beautiful and fun to look at. Like the for instance, the main hub town area has a bunch of creatures that were designed by both the developers and some of the Kickstarters, and all of the designs are interesting. Like, there is one character that is a tiger with spider legs, and there's another one that looks like kind of like a lemur wearing a kimono. There's a couple of other like fox spirits and rabbit spirits in the game. And speaking of the town area, all of the shops that you visit also have really neat animations whenever you walk past them. My favorite one personally was the like library or like scroll archives, where if you walked past the door, the two dragon statues on either side would turn to face you. Those were just really nice touches that I really appreciated. And then for the enemy designs, they're all varied and fantastic. You have like disembodied floating heads that breathe fire or shoot icicles. You have, in the beginning area, there were these dolls that would come to life and just like go up and down in your way. There are tiny fox creatures that will pounce at you from all directions, and a wide variety of other ones. There's too many to mention here. I do wish this game had a bestiary. Like, these designs are so interesting that I wish I could learn more about them in the game and find out the role that they played in the folklore. In addition to that, for the shops, whenever you buy something, there are little cutscenes that they made for the shopkeepers interacting with you or the item that you're buying from them. And I just think that's really cool as well. They put a lot of effort into making sure these shopkeepers felt really endearing. And that's all the aesthetic on the visual side. The audio design here is also fantastic. In terms of like general sound, the pitter patter of leaves, the rustling of trees, the moving of stone, the smashing of ice, all these different things, like the overall sound effects and sound design is really immersive. And the soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. It takes advantage of several Asian sounding instruments. And one touch that I really liked was that all of the character voices, quote unquote, are represented by instruments. For example, there's this one bird character that has two heads, and their voices are represented by a flute, and one head has a flute that sounds a lot more calming, whereas the other head, the flute sounds a lot more erratic when that one speaks. So yeah, the culture and the like folklore is not only felt in the story or in the visuals, it's also felt in the audio, and it all comes together to produce an experience that really, despite the fault of the story, I feel like the Japanese aesthetic and style and folklore and myth do a lot to lift the game up from its flaws and make something that's still enjoyable to engage with. And that's not even talking about the gameplay yet, which I'll go ahead and get into now. So the gameplay of Bow is definitely the part that feels most inspired by Hollow Knight and Ori. So the main mechanic is a variation of the pogo mechanic from Hollow Knight. And here they actually do something to make it feel fresh and like its own thing. So whenever you hit something in the air, your jump and your dash get reset. So as long as you have something to hit, you can stay in the air indefinitely. And this is taken advantage of to great effect in both combat and in platforming. When it comes to the platforming side of things, obviously, um, there are like points where you have to like jump from lamp to lamp, let's say, and hit them to reset your jump and your dash. In terms of other platforming mechanics, you do have like a grapple, you have a ground slam, you're able to redirect projectiles. It's a lot of stuff that feels, in particular, very Ori inspired. I would say that the majority of the platforming feels Ori inspired, although there is a platforming section where you need to pogo between something that's like moving from point to point and having to stay on different sections of moving platforms to avoid like lasers and stuff like that. And that feels extremely Hollow Knight inspired. And all of this feels very snappy, by the way. It actually feels very good to move in this game. It feels fast, it feels fluid, and the like staying up in the air mechanic feels great. Like, I had personally a bit of a hard time learning to pogo in Hollow Knight. I eventually did get the hang of it, but it is a hard thing to pull off consistently, in my opinion. Bow, you won't have any problems with it. It's extremely generous, especially with like the wide swing and the fact that you're not always trying to swing down with it. It's constantly like up or to the side, mostly where you're trying to swing. And so it feels very accessible for people. It's very easy to learn, but some sections can be difficult to master. And yeah, it all feels clearly inspired, but it was never not enjoyable or fun to engage with. I had a great time with it. The same thing can be said about combat and the various boss battles in the game. Combat, as in like general all-around combat, does take advantage of the hitting while you're in the air mechanic, and you're actually incentivized to do that and try to get like combos. There's a mechanic in this game that is a like tea kettle, and it can be used a couple of different ways, where it acts as like the soul mechanic from Hollow Knight, where if you hold down the button, Bo will sit down and make tea and heal himself. But you can also use tea to summon a Daruma, which gives you a special ability. Daruma are like those circular dolls that usually depict the faces of like monsters or spirits or other various Japanese people or creatures. And you use tea to be able to summon these Daruma and pull off these special moves. And if you have a high enough air combo from hitting enemies while in the air, while staying in the air, you will be able to pull off a more powerful version of that special move when you summon the Daruma. For example, one of my favorites was one that just breathed fire in whichever direction I was facing, and the more powerful version of that increased the cone of the fire while also having it deal more damage. There was also one that like shot up icicles in 6 different directions, but the more powerful version of that actually shot homing icicles in like a turret type of way at whatever enemy was on screen. So yeah, general combat feels really good, and then the bosses felt really good too, for the most part. Now granted, some will feel more familiar than others if you've played Hollow Knight or Ori. For example, there is one boss where you are fighting 3 Kenku, and it is almost basically Mantis Lords from Hollow Knight. They do have like their own spin on it and like their own moves, but it feels very much like Mantis Lords. If you've played Hollow Knight, you will know what I'm talking about, and you'll see this footage and know instantly what I'm talking about. There's another boss that actually starts with a sequence where you are platforming while trying to get away from a wave that's constantly chasing you, which feels reminiscent of the tree section from the first Ori game, where you're having to climb up the tree as the water rises. But on the other hand of the spectrum, you do have some bosses that feel original. Like, my favorite one was a fox boss, where you had to grapple off of its collar in order to hit its head, while it was constantly shooting projectiles that like generally homed in your direction. And all of these bosses, regardless of if they felt familiar or more original to the game, felt good to engage with, and they were overall fun to play. And all of them do take advantage of the staying up in the air mechanic to various degrees when it comes to the types of mechanics the bosses use. Now, I will say here, there is one boss that I wasn't a big fan of. It's the second to last boss, and it is a pretty important story boss, so I won't spoil it. But this boss is essentially one long platforming gauntlet where you'll do a platforming section to get to the boss. You'll hit the boss, and then after you hit them, they move backwards through more of the gauntlet so that you have to try to like reach them again. This gauntlet is incredibly long, and there aren't really any checkpoints in the middle of it if you end up dying. I managed to get around this because I had a charm that let me slowly regenerate my health, so whenever I got hit, I would respawn at the next like safe spot and just wait to regen my health. But if I didn't have that charm equipped, I feel like this platforming gauntlet would have been a lot more tedious to get through. It's the only boss in the game like this, to be fair, so at the very least it does vary up the gameplay if you're looking for that, but just for me, I wasn't a big fan of it. There is another aspect to like gameplay and combat, which is the Omamori system, which essentially works as the charm system from Hollow Knight. This is fine, but I feel like it didn't fully live up to its potential, and this is because the game is very stingy when it comes to giving you the slots for these Omamori. You only get 6 in total throughout the game, and they're only handed out through like major story events. And the result of this is that you don't really get a lot of opportunity to experiment with different builds and equipping different Omamori. At least for my entire playthrough, until very late in the game when I had gotten all 6 slots, I just mainly picked 1 or 2 Omamori and stuck with them through most of my experience. And this is another aspect where I feel like the shortness of the game kind of holds the game back a little bit, because I do feel like just a longer game would have given the player more time to experiment with this system. As it is now, with the slots being so scarce and the game being so short, there just isn't a lot of opportunity or incentive to experiment with the different Omamori that you find. The last thing I want to say when it comes to the gameplay is the exploration is a lot of fun. There's plenty of secrets to find off the beaten path. There are different like chests or currency things that you can hit to get some of the currency. There's also something similar to the like caterpillars from Hollow Knight, where you have to find a certain number of these little plant spirit type things, and actually as you find more of them, it helps you unlock and like build new shops and stores to access in the main hub town area, which was really fun. I really liked that mechanic. The only small little nitpick I have with the exploration is that the map icons are really difficult to read. Like, whatever style they used for these icons looks super low res, and some of them, a couple of them are like a really similar color. So yeah, the map icons can sometimes be hard to read, but other than that, the exploration was a lot of fun. Also, the locations feel really good to explore. All of them have like a different aesthetic and different feels when it comes to the platforming. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed myself. And I think that's kind of the takeaway that I want to leave you guys with as a whole. Overall, I did enjoy myself. Like, I saw someone else's review, and something that they said with regards to the length of the game was, if the only complaint that they had was that they wanted more of it, then that is a good thing, and that kind of speaks to the quality of the rest of the game. And that's kind of how I feel about it as well, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. The aesthetics and the gameplay are a lot of fun to engage with. I really liked the constantly colorful and interesting world. I really liked the love and care that these devs used when handling Japanese folklore and myth, and that was constantly interesting to engage with. The gameplay, despite being inspired by other things in more areas than others, does ultimately end up feeling like its own thing, and even the parts that do feel more than a little inspired feel good to engage with. And while the story did feel hurt the most by the game's length, again, I had a fun time engaging with it. The writing was good, the characters were great, some individual moments were fantastic and memorable. So yeah, I feel like this game is the definition of a very solid experience. And if anything, it really shows the potential of Squid Shock to be able to create games like above their presumed caliber. Because, like, again, the fact that they went from mobile games to this is a feat that should be commended. And I personally can't wait to see what games they decide to make next. And when it comes to Bow Path of the Teal Lotus, I do recommend checking it out. And so that's going to be it for me. Thank you everybody so much for checking out the video. I really do appreciate it. Please feel free to leave any thoughts you have in the description, not in the description, in the in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on anything that I've said. And if you've played this game, I'd love to hear your thoughts on your own experience and what you thought of it. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, ringing the bell, liking the video, all that good stuff. And yeah, I will see you guys in whatever you guys would like to see me in next. Stream, review, let's play, whatever you like. Goodbye!